I think that's what keeps me going, doing bigger projects, working with this person. I like to challenge myself a lot. We're doing like 30 harmonies. I'm trying to beat her speed. To me, it's like a video game. I'm trying to get to the next level.
Bars.
Bars.
Thank you for joining us. We are at JFTR Live. My name is Denisse Cruz. I'm joined by 3 badass engineers who are at the top of the game right now. So let's chat. So you guys are all different. I feel like you all have different paths of engineering. And I kind of just want to talk about how you each got to where you are right now. So if we want to start maybe with Jenny first. Yeah. Well, how did you get into engineering?
I got to crunch this story down for sure. For me, I've been in audio engineering for 9 years. I went to school for it. I went to Cal State Dominguez Hills in Carson here. I started at a recording studio in Orange County where most of the work there was classical and jazz music.
Okay.
So I spent 3 years working there as an assistant engineer and then an engineer. At some point I was like, okay, I lived in South Central. So I was driving basically an hour almost every day to Orange County. And I was like, okay, this has to change.
Yeah. Especially when LA is right there.
Yeah. And I was like, I got to find something in Hollywood. And I really wanted to work with hip hop. Like, I really love hip hop, R&B. So I started my freelance career. Worked at different studios. I worked with different labels. I did a lot of networking with A&Rs and managers. And they put me in different studios. And then recently I worked at Spotify Studios in LA. I did a contract there for like 6 months, worked with a lot of people there. And
would you say you're like tracking? Are you mixing mostly? Are you?
Right now I'm tracking a lot. But before it was either tracking, mixing, Dolby Atmos, and it just kind of comes in waves. So right now I just finished a big project with Dolby Atmos. And now I'm back to tracking, doing songwriting camps, doing K-pop camps. And yeah, that's basically my mojo right now.
Kiara, you started in Florida?
I did. I also, it's interesting like catching up our whole stories because we have to consolidate so much.
Yeah.
I started in Florida somewhere maybe upwards of 10 years ago, just not knowing anything. I didn't go to school, so I count like the first 3 years of just interning as my schooling. Soon I started assisting. And then I started working with a lot of songwriters. And that's how I really got good at tracking, was just I was working with songwriters in songwriting camps. Eventually mixing just kind of like came into the picture. My mentor for many years now is a mixing engineer. So thankfully my ears were attuned, I think, from the beginning. And then Dolby Atmos came into the picture, started playing around with that a lot. And
is that your bread and butter right now, Atmos work?
I'm doing a lot of Atmos and a lot of mixing now. I'm doing a little less tracking, but yeah.
And Eva, what about you?
Well, I came from Minnesota out here at this point, I came out.
That makes so much sense.
I don't know what that means. But yeah, so I came out here in 2011. So at this point, I don't know, it's at 12, 13 years. I've, also interned, assisted. I've been all over the map in Los Angeles. I worked at a pop studio called Nightbird with a lot of bigger pop artists for a couple years. And then I wanted to do a little bit more than just tracking. A lot of people love doing that. It's not really my thing, just the hours. So then I kind of moved to an indie rock studio where I started doing a lot of tracking with bands and kind of ran a studio in East LA. And then went free. I've always been freelance for these people. I've never been employed by anybody. It's always been an assisting on freelance.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, I prefer it that way. I don't really am required to be anywhere. I can say no, which we often don't because that's what keeps you working. But then after that, I kind of got roped in a bit into more of the film, section. I got asked to do some assisting on some score mixing, which was very, very exciting for me because I love classical kind of music and I love film scores are basically to me just kind of classical pop. It's they're written to be hooky as well. So now, since then, that's kind of been what I've mainly been doing. I've been doing a lot of score mixing for TV shows and films. And I still like once a year do a passion like record project where I'll really only do if I'm allowed to produce, because I'm not a fan of not having a say in how the music turns out.
Yeah.
So I do that now, which is really fun too, because I do like world music and like bluegrass. I just did a bluegrass record, which was super fun.
So what are you guys working on right now that you're excited about that you can talk about? Or like if I was to say like, this is a Eva piece, this is a Kiara piece, like is there something that you can show, like if no one's familiar with your work, like what's like a proud project that you're stoked about?
Yeah, no, I've worked on a variety of different projects. Obviously, DUNE II was, that's kind of the big one right now that everybody's like, the hype. And I call it DUNE II spam at this point because it's like so many posts. It's just like
take the credits, take the ones that are released, take it.
Mm-hmm. That always is like a thing on my resume that everyone's like, oh my God, which is fun. The process of working on a film like that is actually so fun. It's like exhausting, but it's like everybody on that project is like 100%. The whole time. And it's like working on a project like that where everything from like the assistants to like, the composer, there were tap out moments on that because the days were just like solid, 13, 14 hour days of recording for many, many days in a row. So kind of be like the captain of that recording team was very fun though, because everybody is so close because they were all the musicians for the first movie. So like making something like that come to life and then seeing it is always just like, mind-blowing to see something like that and to see it like really work out in the end and like be something that so many people are just like, oh my God, this is insane, know? And it's like, yeah, it really was, it was cool. Mm-hmm. Alan did all the Atmos mixes for this one. But I help with the soundtracks. The soundtrack is different than the score mix. And I got to sit in on a couple days of the score mix, which was like, you sit down and you freeze. Because I'm like, this movie was already almost fully mixed and I was in on like fixes and stuff. But some things I was starting from scratch and it's like, I see him do it over and over again. He's like, so here's what I'm doing. I'm doing this and that and this and that. And he's like, all right, I'm leaving now. And I'm like, I don't want to mess this up. It's like, It's just like really like, oh my God, like I just sit there and like put one plug-in on. I'm like, no, it's not good. It's not good. So that's exciting, for me, like projects that really push you, it starts solidifying the ground under you for the next project. So
for me, just because I mixed it here for sure, just for the record, I did the Dolby Atmos for Rapsody, and that's coming out next month. And I think for me, for me, it's huge because I've done a couple of Dolby mixes. They've been singles, they've been small EPs, but this album is 22 songs. So I'm just like, it's crazy because I worked with her before the pandemic. I did a couple recording sessions with her and then to circle back and now finally do a Dolby mix with her, and her whole album it's exciting.
And I saw her walk out. She was stoked.
It was a dope day. I was like, you have to come in. I was like, bring the manager, bring the A&R, like come in and experience it. And we spent like an hour just playing back songs and she loved it. And then I was just like, I freaking did my job. I'm so proud of myself. But yeah, that's coming out soon. And I'm excited for the world to hear her project because she has a lot to say and she got very intimate with her words, and I'm so happy this is gonna come out.
I don't think that my best work has come yet. If I'm being very honest, there's a lot of stuff that I'm really proud of, but like I think currently speaking, as we stand today, most of the stuff that I love and I'm most proud of it's not out. But my best work is yet to come. So stay tuned.
It's a great answer.
Yeah, that's really good.
Same
Mic
here,
drop.
honestly. Same here.
Your guys' job is very collaborative. You have to work with, there's not only the engineers, there's the producers, there's the vocal producers, there's the assistant engineers, there's the actual artist. Have you guys found any issues working collaboratively with like newer people based on the fact that we are women? We're all women.
My first thought was like, when people are nice, it's collaborative. Mm-hmm. When people are not, then it becomes less collaborative. I mean, this is not necessarily like a woman thing. I'm just like speaking in general. I think engineering is like it can be very collaborative where it's just like constant back and forth, constant like opinions, ideas being thrown out, just like trying new things. And it can also just be like, okay, this is what I'm doing today. And like not give very many opinions depending on who's in the room, what they're willing or not willing to hear.
I feel like for me, it's always hit or miss. It's like everyone always thinks the woman knows less in the room, pretty much no matter who you work with. But I think there's a lot of people who are a lot more open to it. And then sometimes you walk in and it's just like, oh, you just know what it's going to be. You know it's going to be one of those days where it's just like, you're not trusted, you're not expected to know, and you often know, a ton. But I found personally for me, like the older I get, a lot about it is just kind of coming into your voice. I feel like as women, we have to really sort of put up a lot of barriers that men don't, and we have to have a lot more skill and a lot of confidence. It's hard to like maintain your femininity and also like maintain like having confidence. It's always like a push or pull for me.
Yeah.
And I feel like the older I've gotten, the more outspoken I've gotten, and the more when I walk in now, I just exude a confidence, and people who don't recognize that, I just kind of ignore them. Because, especially when you start working with a lot of professionals, like high up professionals, for me, that's never an issue really now. It's like when you walk in a room, it's like you wouldn't be in that room if you weren't like, didn't have the skill to be there.
Did you have like a mentor that like you feel like really guided you to your path, or was it like you kind of coming into your own?
I mean, a lot of it was me coming into my own. I think once I started in score mixing, like I worked for Alan Meyerson. Hans, Zimmer is actually a huge mentor too. Hansi. These are men, like I said, if you were not able to do the job, you would not be there.
Right.
So you I don't want to say you get burned, but you definitely get put through the exact same treatment that the guys would. And like sometimes that is not great, because you're nervous. Like you don't want to seem like you don't know what you're doing. And it's like, I don't want to get reprimanded, but you kind of like having people like that, I feel like mentor you is a lot better than having people, I've had it, men with women will just, let you they'll let you skate by, because they're like, oh, it's the girl, she's the girl. And they're like, you don't have to do it. Like one of the guys will do it. And it's like, no, I want to do it. Like, let me do it. It's the only way we're going to learn.
Yeah. How are we going to cut our teeth? Well, speaking of mentors, I mean, Jimmy Douglas is yours, right?
Jimmy is one of my mentors, yes.
And how did you form that relationship? Like, how did that even work out?
This is a funny story.
Should I have asked?
So I met Jimmy because I was apprenticing at a studio a couple doors down. But how I got to actually be one of his mentees was one day I was early for a session, and I really had to pee. I live an hour away from the studio, so I was early and I didn't have a key to the studio, so it was either I go to like the closest supermarket or I implode. So I saw Jimmy's car. I had briefly met his assistant the week before, and so I just like knocked. I was like, okay, I just had to talk myself into it. I was like, he's a human. He's done all these supernatural things.
Yeah,
yeah, but he's human. He'll understand. Just knock on the door. I was like, so I did. I knocked on the door. He opened it, and I was like, I'm so sorry to bother you, but is there any way I could please use your restroom? I'm early for a session, and he knew the person I was working with, so that all helped. Just being part of the community, and that was it. He let me use his restroom. We chatted for 5 minutes, and then I went about my day. A few days later, I got a call from his assistant, and this terrified me at the time. He was just like, I don't know what you said to the man, but he wants to see you. And I was thinking, oh my God, did I insult him? Did I say something like weird, inappropriate? Like, I didn't even remember our conversation. It was so brief, but I was like, what would he possibly want? So we set up a time. We went, and we just ended up chatting about old records for like 3 hours, like something ridiculous. And at the end, he was like, look, I know you got this going on over there, but if you want to come and just watch and learn, you're welcome to anytime. I didn't know what that encompassed. I didn't know what that meant, but I knew that I was standing in front of a very special person and that I couldn't say no to that opportunity. So I just said yes, and I started going there almost every day after university, after work. I would just go there and hang out, do my schoolwork there, watch Jimmy mix.
What's he telling you, like which gear he was using, why he was using it?
No, Jimmy doesn't tell you anything. You just watch over his shoulder. If you have some questions, you can think about your questions and you can think on them some more. And maybe if you can't figure out an answer after like really thinking about it, then you can ask a question. And that also helped me figure out like how he's thinking. You know, it helped me figure out not why in the beginning, but eventually when you watch someone for so long, you end up predicting what they're gonna do. You know, like, oh, they're messing with the compressor, and then like, oh no, he's gonna go back to the setting. And then he does. And then like once you get to that place, you're like, okay, now I can start asking more questions because I understand what's happening.
Yeah.
When I walked in, I didn't know a compressor from an EQ. Like I didn't know anything at all. I was listening to records being made that I probably should not have heard. You know, it was that kind of thing.
Now that you guys are like more established in your career, do you have those tendencies? Do you see yourself grabbing a certain compressor or grabbing a certain mic for everything? Or does it really depend per session? You know, because I hear at the studio all the time, it's like C800, 1073, CL1B. Like I don't even know what that means, most of it. But I hear it every day and I'm like, okay, I can predict that they're going to ask for this because this is this session. Like, do you guys find yourself going into those repetitive patterns?
I have. I feel like also I've had a mentor too that I still work with, and his template I build off of either the vocal chain or the certain auxes or certain reverbs are always on that. And that kind of became part of my own. So when I do other sessions, either at my house or at other studios or other artists, I'll adapt that too. So it's usually plugins. He works a lot in the box.
Are you guys all, are you analog? Are you digital? Are you hybrid?
I'm mostly digital. I'm mostly in the box, but a little hybrid sometimes, depending on what I'm working on.
Yeah, digital, unless when tracking. It's just quicker for revisions. I work on like 20 sessions in a day for mixing. So sometimes, so it's like we just got to move. I don't have time to recall a minor change, and you know what I mean. It's just it goes a lot quicker in my opinion. Unfortunately, I'd love to work with. Someday I will have a studio where I do that kind of stuff, but right now it's like not so much. Yeah.
Same. Yeah. I carry a backpack with my full studio in it. So it's like my computer, my Apollo, headphones, extra XLR cables. And that's what I use at home. That's what I use anywhere else, especially when it's tracking sessions and they're like, hey, pull up to the studio. Sometimes they just give me an address and I'm just like, okay, I don't know if they're going to have a full studio, but I know they're going to have speakers.
Yeah.
So I just got to make sure I can bring everything that I need to track vocals or track guitar.
So you don't get much of a heads up of like, not even who you're working with, but like the place, anything, like they don't give you any sort of writer sheet? The
most I'll get is an address and then I'll Google it and be like, okay, this is a studio. But sometimes too, I pull up to the studio, like for example, was it Paramount or... It was a huge commercial studio and I was like, cool, I'm gonna be in front of a console, great. So I pull up and they're like, okay, so we have 3 engineers in the house. We're gonna set you up here in this ISO room and we're gonna give you a table and 2 speakers. And I'm just like, oh, so I'm not gonna be in the main room.
Oh.
Okay, it's cool. I brought all my stuff with me. So all I did is set up and then I worked with the songwriter and we got records done, took those same records when it was time to cut them with the main artist. In the control room, I would just, send them the session and then we would keep rolling the whole night like that. So I'm always prepared. And every time I like forgot like a 1/4 inch or maybe a splitter, I make sure that it's in my bag the next time.
Yeah.
Do you bring a mic?
I'm bringing a mic now. Mm-hmm. I used to not, but now Document Audio sent me like a really dope ass mic. They have a clone U87i, and they're like, "Hey, here we want you to use it. Let us know how it sounds. When I have the time and I get there early to the session, I'll set it up." And I'm like, "Okay, this is cool." But yeah, sometimes I bring a mic. Yep. Yeah.
Do you guys travel with mics? Is that like a?
I don't, unless I'm told ahead of time that I need to bring a mic. Typically, no. But I also haven't been thrown in too many situations like that where I'm not aware of anything. I mean, if the resources are limited wherever I'm going, at least that's communicated to me. So then I know I have to bring something.
I kind of like not being told what's going to happen. Just like, here, you got to show up here, blah, blah, blah. We're working with this producer.
She stays ready.
And then I'm not like...
It's so crucial to your job, though. You've got to learn how to troubleshoot, how to figure out how to make the situation better for yourself.
I know I'm going to do a great job because I've done this countless of times. But if they tell me who it is, I get nervous. I'm like, oh, no, I'm going to work with so-and-so. I start getting anxious and nervous. So it's way better for you to not tell me who I'm going to work with until I get there. And I'm just like, oh, this is tight. This is going to be really cool, you know?
So a lot of up and coming engineers, they're always super excited to ask, and we get questions on the stream all the time about, what gear the engineers are using. I know a lot of people get like annoyed at that question because it really is something that you're listening for, right?
Yeah,
and you're trying to correct, right? So it's like, what tool is good for that? So in general, like, what is the advice that you can give to engineers on how to shape their ears? How did you guys shape your ears and your sound? What makes you guys you? Is that a big question to ask?
Oh, no, I mean,
That's a good question.
Yeah, it is. I think it's an interesting question. I think that for young engineers that are still trying to figure out their sound, or like their toolbox, I should say, you learn to use what's accessible to you today. You don't have to buy all the things. You can just learn to use the tools you have really well and understand like the nuances between those. So then when you do get to like the more expensive or the more advanced tools, you have like a really good foundation.
So for a lot of upcoming engineers, you got to just build a good template, and then just pull your favorite compressors and learn the hell out of them, because most compressors, the way they're designed, they all have the same knobs. Some of them might be different from like, oh, this one has a mix knob, this one has a saturation knob. But if you learn your compressor, if you learn your favorite EQ or reverb, by the time you switch to a new plugin, you're like, okay, now I know now I can hear the difference.
Interesting. I mean, with musicians, right, with artists, it's always like, listen to the genre that you're focusing, listen to as much as possible. With you guys, in regards to, it's not just music, it's also the technology behind it. Is it also figuring out like what was used on your favorite records, like what people used on those instruments, on those voices? Is it the way that they were tracked? Like, what are you guys researching? What are you guys learning about?
At least for me, it was the way it was tracked. If I liked a record, I would research everybody who was involved, from like the songwriter to the record label to the mixing engineer. So then I'll start going on like down just a wormhole of like figuring out who mixed it. And then if I know, like, for example, a lot of my favorite records were mixed by Leslie Brathwaite. And at some point, I even went to a seminar with Mixed with the Masters. They did a seminar in France. So I was like, I have to go. So I went there for a week, watched him mixed. He became like my mentor for like a week. It's funny because when I went, a lot of the techniques he was doing, I was already doing. So I was like, okay, I'm not that far off.
Validating.
It was that whole trip was not me learning how to mix. It was more like a validation and like learning, like, okay, you're doing good. Just keep doing what you're doing. And once your time comes, and you just got to be ready for that moment.
Yeah. By the way, to add on to what she said about like using your resources, I know people to this day who are amazing mixers who still use just like Pro Tools plugins, because I've had people tell me their compressor is probably one of the best ones out there because everything is like super transparent. So very good for like subtractive EQ. I've heard like incredible mixes that I even use for reference that's like just using that stuff. Especially these days, there's so many plugins being made that are just knobs. They're just like moving knobs. Not to say that we don't love Soothe or Golfos or stuff like that, where you're just pulling things, but I don't even know what this is doing. It's just like, it's just knobs. And it's like, if you don't understand how you're shaping your sound, it's like, I think that's a great call, like to have, because that basic stuff is actually really, really important to know. And there's a BF76 in Pro Tools. Like there's that stuff in Pro Tools. You don't need to buy $100 or more thing to just kind of have the same thing with a different kind of tonality.
I think across like every industry, everyone's looking for like the quick fix, right? What's going to make me the next Jason Joshua, right?
Yeah, but there is no quick fix to mixing necessarily. I mean, there are tricks and tools. You can help your flow, right, be a little quicker with templates, like getting things prepped. But something else I was going to add for young mixers to maybe try as an exercise is try to match a mix. If you can get your hands on some multis and you have like a mastered song that's out there, play around. See if you can get the kick to sound the same. See if you can get that snare to sound the same. See if you can mix the song to match. Because doing that enough times gets you to a place where I don't even know how to say it.
No, I mean, musicians do that all the time with transcribing.
Yeah.
Right. Can you make yourself sound like this person did? So it's exactly the same, but in engineering. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how like I started mixing. Jimmy was like, all right, here you go. Exercise for the day.
Yeah, and these guys like don't mind. It's funny, a lot of these big mixers don't gatekeep this stuff because at the end of the day, they're like, my ears are developed, you know?
Yeah.
So they're showing people what they're doing, but it doesn't really make a difference if your ears aren't there yet. So it takes like years for people like us, which I feel like we all have at this point, because you can learn the tools, and at the same time though, it's like until you have that experience of using them yourself, it's like you can't just copy someone's signal chain and it be the thing. It's like you need to know how to tweak it and like actually make it work to the timing of whatever song you're working on for compression, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, like sitting behind Jimmy, I would watch him and I could predict what he was doing. But then when it came to like doing it myself, I would freeze. It was
I know that feeling.
interesting.
Yeah,
I went through
totally.
like it took me a while too to be like, okay, Kiara, like you've seen him do it, you know what you want to hear.
So frustrating.
And I would freeze. And then eventually, you know, once you start doing that, like rebuilding mixes or like actually manipulating and sitting in the seat and doing the thing yourself.
It's also a speed thing, right? Like he was probably way faster.
Well, in the beginning, yeah. Today,
In the beginning.
sorry, Jay.
Those got chops.
Sorry, Jay. The music industry already is like, it's not for the weak. You know, you're just talking about 13-hour days. It's back to back. It's, you know, freelancing. It's getting call, hey, be in the studio in an hour. You know, it's pull up at 3 a.m. It's all these things. Like, what makes you guys keep going?
For me, it's I have so many goals in the music industry, but it's just trying to reach them. I have a list and I'm like crossing them out, and like every time I cross them out, I make more, and it could be bad at some point, but I think that's what keeps me going. I just got to keep doing the next project, doing bigger projects, working with this person. I like to challenge myself a lot. So even for example, like I said, like, please don't tell me who's going to be in the studio. I just want to get there and be challenged. If the songwriter's like, we're doing harmonies, we're doing like 30 harmonies, I'm trying to beat her speed. You know, to me, it's like a video game. I'm trying to get to the next level. So I think that's what keeps me going.
Bars.
What? Bars. I do have to sometimes sit back and be like, hold on, like enjoy your journey, even the low times, because I could keep working on certain projects, but I usually forget what I did. I'm like, oh yeah, I think I worked on that song. It just because I'm moving so fast. So I think spending time with like family, taking breaks, even spending time with my dog, it just eases my mind, and I have to force myself to relax. So I think that it's a balance between having a break and then having a challenge, and taking those down moments where maybe the session was bad, or they didn't like my mix, or I didn't get approved for a project or something like that. I don't take that as like a negative. I more take it like a challenge where it's like, okay, didn't happen, but let me make it better, or let me do something different next time, you know? It's just always been a learning process, and making sure I just enjoy this entire journey of myself going through this like career where there's no rules.
I really love connecting with people. That is probably what keeps me going. I really love walking into a room and like getting to know someone so intimately, so quickly, and creating something from nothing with them. Like I find that to be very rewarding, especially when you get on really well. And even like in mixing and in Dolby, like no matter what step of the process, the connection, the collaboration, that helping to get to the end point is what I enjoy the most. It's what keeps me going, because all that little bullshit.
Yeah. I would say for me, collaboration is like a huge thing too. It's like, it's kind of validating when you like make a great mix and everybody's like, oh my God, it's like so much better, which is a bit, that's an ego thing. And I've had to check that a lot in recent years, because I found, I got the Grammy for that classical album. And I found when I got that, I like almost had a bit of like a weird breakdown, which was strange because you think you're going to attain this thing you've been working for 11 years, a whole decade, and you get it. And you're like, is this all I've been working for? Like this statue? Like what am I doing this for real? Because once you realize that isn't what's validating you, you have to kind of rethink outside the box of like why.
You kind of need it too, right?
What do you mean?
Like the Grammy, right? That probably opened more doors for you.
I mean, that was more of a deal back in the 80s and 90s. Now I would say no. Like,
really?
Yeah, no.
I mean, easy to say when you have a Grammy.
I know. But no, I don't get paid more. I would say, like, I haven't had people come up to me and go, you should do it because you're a Grammy. And then for me, like she's saying, the creative process is huge. Mm-hmm. When you get to sit there and just listen to music all day, it's very, very therapeutic, like for me. And it like, the ability to also use my hands and use my ears, it's very engaging. It's fun. It's like a video game sometimes. It's like, you're like, and when you struggle and have those days where you're just like struggling hard, it's like I always have to check myself. And I'm like, man, at least I'm not a banker. Like, no offense to bankers, but it's like their job is the same every day, and I think that would be really nice sometimes because it's like you really struggle, but then... But the payoff is like, when you get bigger and bigger and you start moving towards goals, your goals also develop into different things. I mixed that an immersive thing for the new Apple headset, like this like immersive dinosaur thing on one of the apps. And I mean, how cool, it's like we had the technology while we were working on it, and it was so awesome. And I was like, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to be pushing not just, music and artists, but for me, it's about this whole scope of technology in the world, really. It's like, I always like to think bigger picture than that, like than just me sitting in a room mixing. I like seeing how this Dolby Atmos is how it's developing and what this kind of stuff is going to do to like change everything as far as technology goes.
Are you guys getting excited about how Atmos is picking up in popularity right now? You guys are always like learning different technologies and stuff, and everything's kind of getting thrown at you. Like, is this the one that you think is going to stick?
I like how the industry and the tech world is making it stick. I think they're like making it like cool, like hip. They're attracting listeners. It's like almost like TikTok. If you're on TikTok, everybody else is on TikTok, then it's cool, And also it's like a new way of like how the consumer is going to listen to music. And I think that's pretty intriguing because I always like trying new things, trying new technologies, seeing what's next. So the way the tech world is doing it, I'm kind of proud of it. And I'm like, yes, keep making new shit, keep making cooler stuff, make more cars, make home systems.
Make it more accessible. I think like the accessibility of it, that's grown and that's made it so consumers can have it at home. I think the key for it to continue to grow. Also, like, I'm really excited for live spaces to be more immersive.
I know, me too.
I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah. I mean, I would say I was a little on the fence at first. I think my opinion on it changed from day to day because you saw tech pushing it, but it didn't seem like they were pushing it for the right reasons. It was more of to, promote new headphones and this and that. And it was like, stuff's not accessible to everybody. 5.1 rooms, 7.1, whatever rooms aren't accessible to everybody, only to certain people. So you think about the rest of the world, not the Western world and people. And to me, it was like, doesn't really make sense, but it
wasn't just you. A lot of people were saying that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I'm a huge fan of tech and advancement. So for me, when I got the opportunity and it was like, we're going to pay you to figure this out, I was like, oh yeah, count me in, because it's like scientific. And there was a lot of pushback from, I think, the previous generations, because it just, to them, it was like, it doesn't make sense. Everybody was so ingrained, because the artists were a bit mad, for certain reasons. The labels weren't doing it right. I had a bit of an issue with some of that stuff because it was like they're just pushing it for finance stuff to get on playlists quicker. I was skeptical, and now it seems like it's been changing a lot. And
yeah,
I'm
the
a big
attitude
fan
towards
of
it has really changed to where people are excited to treat it like a playground,
Yeah.
right? Of like how to push your skill to the next level.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
When I usually mix for Atmos, I like to bring, once the Atmos mix is done, I like to bring the artist in the studio, and then we'll do a playback listening session. And just from that day forward, they realize like, okay, next time I record a song or work on an album, I'm gonna do it differently because I know this is gonna be the new way of like people will listen to my music in spatial audio. So I gotta make sure stems are separated, hooks and harmonies are separated. It's just a different aspect of like the way they recorded their song.
Yeah, once they come in the room, I find that like even producers too, like they'll get more inspired to on their next work, like not just separate the stems, but to add more sounds, add more stacks, add more strings, add more just whatever, the song calls for. But they're like, oh yeah, this would be awesome. Like I see them before they leave. They're like imagining all kinds of things.
Are there any changes that you guys would love to see happen in the industry? I mean, I'm sure there are, but can you guys talk about a couple of things that, whether it be like business side, whether it be pay side, whether it be like a gender thing, like obviously we'd all love to see more women in the room.
So the first things that come to mind for me, I think are topics that are common amongst a lot of creatives, but borderline unionizing. Not that I necessarily think unionizing is an answer. I know for many years different places have tried and different labels have tried, and I can't necessarily speak on all that, but I think having some sort of standard practice for the business, I think would be nice. There are standard practices today, but I think that they can be improved upon.
Totally.
I think with billing or business or even credits and like standardizing credits with different distributors and different labels. And
there was something that we figured out the other day. Apparently, when you ask for Atmos credits, it has to be different. If it's for spatial,
I talked to them about that.
Yeah, it has to be worded differently. So you have to word it as like spatial engineer instead of immersive engineer or Atmos engineer, and then it won't get listed on Apple credits. Yeah, and they don't have assistant engineers on spatial, so it has to be additional engineering. There's all these weird red tape things that it's like you have that many people working under you and you can't figure that out.
Yeah, and it's like in film, like the catering company gets credit for things. It's like if there are other industries that have standards that I think music can pull from because it's doable. It's especially in like today's day and age, like things are so accessible, things are so digital. There's no reason silly little things like that should happen. There's no reason anybody should wait 3 months to get paid for anything.
I totally agree with you. I feel like at some point, I don't even think it's like our job. I feel like people who work at labels who get from an intern to an assistant A&R to an A&R and then they just go above for many years. I don't think there is a school for being an A&R, how to be an A&R. I think you just kind of get pushed in, I met a lot of singers, producers, engineers who later became A&Rs, So I don't know how they're learning to input these credits or this information, but there's like only a few times where I actually received an email and said, hey, I noticed you worked on this record. Can you please let me know your first and last name and the studio you worked at? And da-da-da-da-da.
As a studio manager, I have never received that email one time for my staff.
Exactly. It's so minimal.
It's me having to send it, me having to clarify after the fact.
Yeah.
What's something do you guys have any thoughts
I mean, when I was a lot younger, I had the thought of like an HR department at studios because it's like, working with certain hip hop people, we don't want the woman in the room, getting accosted or kind of berated by the posse. I've had something said to me where I'm just like, you gotta be kidding me. It's like, and I get upset. And then you have some of the other engineers at the studio go, well, he was gonna say something like that. I'm like, so what? It's like ruining my weekend. You know, it's one of those times where you go, well, now I don't want to be in the industry anymore.
Right.
It's not fair, you know, but the thing is that people with a certain status, people who pay the money, people who are at studios months at a time, paying however many thousands of dollars, it's like, you know, they run the place, they run the joint, they do whatever they want, they trash the studio, and you know, I know there's certain artists that are not allowed at certain studios anymore. I won't mention them, but it's like good on them. You know, they're like, absolutely not. You know, like, you know, I can't really be like, I just wish people weren't assholes. That's kind of the gist of the conversation. It's like I've changed over the time, and I've molded myself to be able to fit into a place, which I wish sometimes I would have from the beginning had to do that. Like I wish I could have come in and been, not to say like not session etiquette things, but it's like I wish I just, you know, I don't know. I just wish it would have gone differently in certain ways, you know.
I mean, managing my staff right now, we have had to talk to my female engineers about specific scenarios. And I'm like, hey, like you are going to be treated differently. You can either go this way or this way.
Yeah.
This way, they're not going to take you seriously. If you want to work in the music industry, you have to put up some kind of barrier. You just do. It sucks. We can't be as cool as the boys sometimes. You disagree.
Well, like I argue that like we're cooler.
100%.
I get a lot of artists that are like seeking specifically like a female engineer, someone that's like a little bit softer, a little bit more nurturing in the process because they've had like traumatic experiences before that they don't even share with me necessarily sometimes because it's just like very personal. The energy is different no matter what. But I think that's the beauty of being a woman in the industry is like that the energy is different. Like I also in the beginning like molded myself to dress a little differently, to act a little differently. Like there was a lot of like masculine energy coming out because that was the energy that I was in. And I've learned with time that I don't necessarily need to be that way. You know,
you can put on makeup. You can give hugs.
You can wear cute clothes, and I mean, I still don't wear dresses to the studio because, like, if I have to crawl under a console, I've had to do that.
Yeah, that's what I think of is like if I have to crawl under a console, like it's whatever clothes I'm in. I don't want to get dirty, so I've never like dressed up in the studio, but like I dress the way I want.
Well, with them, it was mostly like, okay, a producer slides into your DMs. What do you do? And it's like you could flirt, you could, you know, take that route. And that's one thing, you know, you could also just be like, hey, I actually want to work professionally with you. So like, let's take it to the studio. Like, I'm not going to slide through your place at night. You know, there's all these different scenarios that men don't have to navigate or think twice about.
Yeah. Something that my mentor told me pretty early on that I think I carry with me and will continue to carry with me forever is that always know what you can contribute in a room. No matter what room you walk into. Like reading a room is also obviously very helpful, understanding the dynamics, the roles that already exist, and knowing the value that you can provide puts you on a level where like if people want to take advantage, it's like you're not giving people an opportunity to look at you and be like, oh, this is what she's here for. It's like, no, she's here because she's here to do this. This is what she has to offer, not this other thing that you're fantasizing about.
And like I said, with like experience, it just changes, you know. It's like you start seeing it more and more. It's like people want to work with women. Now I get calls a lot, like, you know any women engineers? You know any like women of color engineers? You know, do you know any LGBT, like all this kind of stuff? So it's like now that that's kind of getting recognized, it's amazing. And I think, you know, one thing that's very beneficial, it's like women, I feel like we kind of put up a guard, but we also do this thing where I feel like a lot of time we kind of like drop our egos at the door, which men oftentimes don't do. So it's like, you know, Prince loved working with women engineers, you know. There's a lot of big artists who even back then loved working with women. Like there's times you can pull ahead because it's like, and the other boys get angry because especially with mentors, like they're not dumb, you know, and they like women because we're not like the first to answer a question if we don't know what we're talking about. It's like, there are things I would want to change, but it's almost like there's not anything on my path that I would have wanted to change. And especially now just watching all these young women communities. I mean, there's a panel every week, you know, with all women and like women helping women. And it's like, it's so much different than, you know, 12 years ago when I was here. There was like one, maybe it was called La Wim, and which turned into WIM, Women in Music. But now it's like, you've got We Are Moving the Needle, you've got, you know, Simone with soundtrack mixers. I can't even get to all of them, you know?
You're a woman. You're a woman.
Yeah, women power, which is, I mean, whatever. It's great.
It's great,
It's like,
yeah.
It's totally cool. I'm like, let's go, you know? This is like awesome. So, yeah, it's like, I like whatever. It's like sometimes I wish, and then sometimes I'm like, whatever. It's like makes you who you are. Like, this is why we're good at what we do. Like, we went through it, you know?
I mean, scheduling for my sessions sometimes, you know, if a rap session comes in, I have to check myself. I'm like, no, like they could do that. Like I will put her in that room and it may not be great for her. I may be setting her up to fail, but that kind of is what the industry is. And you have to learn how to get that tough skin. Cause if I just say, no, she can't handle it, she'll never learn. Like, who am I to hold someone back, you know?
Yeah, and then
really
you definitely get scarred when you find out that they didn't put you in because you were a woman, or they didn't put. I've been in those situations early in my career, and it scarred me throughout my whole life. Where I'm like, hell no, next session I'm gonna come in differently. I think also it's like the way you show up to a session. If you show up and just kind of like not say anything and just try to talk to the person who called you in for the gig, then you're kind of setting yourself up for like not to be seen. So I feel like even when you come into a session, say hi to everybody, make sure you let them know like, hey, I'm here to engineer so-and-so, and now people are forced to acknowledge you and be like, okay, this is her, she's the engineer, you know? You learn that like that throughout your career. Like you learn that, okay, when I come in, I have to present myself and just stand out a little bit more than I usually do and when you don't know nobody.
Well, a lot of like getting your foot in the room, right, isn't just getting your foot in the room. It's also being fucking prepared, right? Because if you get your foot in the room and you're not ready, everyone's gonna be like, oh yeah, that's the girl that doesn't really do much.
It's happened. It's totally happened to me. Like, it's how it happened.
But that's with everyone, any gender.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But also, like, there's nothing like an experience to show you that you are prepared, like a new experience to show you that you're ready, like something you've never done. And now you're there and you're like, actually, I can do this. Maybe the first time it takes a little longer. Maybe the first time it's a little messy. The session's messy, the room's like whatever's messy might be messy, but you still pull through and you don't leave, you don't give up. I think like, especially professionals admire that kind of attitude rather than say like, oh, she wasn't ready. Like she didn't have her shit together. You know? Like, it's more of like,
The perseverance.
oh yeah, it's like a perseverance. Like, oh, like she figured it out. Like,
Yeah.
And then they'll respect you more for that.
Totally. Well, thank you guys so much. It was awesome to talk about all of these things with you. And again, you know, happy Women's Month.
Yeah.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
This is so
thank
lovely.
you. Yeah.
I know.
fun.
I didn't want it to end. I don't know. It was like really short to me.
Well, we'll do a part two.
Talk all day.
We'll do a part two.